Hello everybody, my name is Jacobo Gomez Posada. I am a lawyer and I am currently studying a master's degree in international intellectual property law. And I wanted to take a moment to discuss the death mode controversy. What is the death mode controversy for those of you who are unaware? Well, it has these two lovely protagonists. On one side, we have the US tech company Figma. Figma is probably very well known for providing the biggest platform for software design in the world. On the other hand, we have Lovable.dev. Lovable.dev is a Stockholm-based AI startup that, you guessed it, has developed an AI agent to automate software design. So what exactly happened between these two? Why is there bad blood between them? Well, Figma sent a cease and desist letter, a very colorfully written cease and desist letter, in which they explained that they own the trademark for dev mode. This sent the internet in a bit of a disarray. Why? Well, dev mode is a very common expression among developers and it has been used by countless of companies before to describe that their application have some tools aimed at developers, well, being able to use them in the process of developing software or connecting or integrating different pieces of software. To the software developing community in the internet, this feels disingenuous. Dev mode is not something that should be owned by a company, let alone be enforced. The matter of fact that Figma was not only claiming that they own it, but telling a fellow software developer that they cannot use the word dev mode rubbed people really the wrong way. However, things are never that simple, and it is very important to understand exactly what is being claimed by Figma in this instance. And the best way to do so is by analyzing their trademark registration. Getting to know a trademark can be really important to understand the context of what is happening for several reasons. First of all, trademarks are territorial by nature. So if Figma want to sue anybody, they need to own the trademark in the territory. This might be particularly relevant when you think that Figma is a US company trying to have an EU-based company cease and desist the usage of the words dev mode. It is also important to recognize that there are different types of trademarks and that they might protect different things. A logo that has the word trademark has a completely different, or be treated in a completely different way than, for example, maybe the shape of a bottle, which can also be a trademark. The idea is that different types of trademarks have different, what we call, scopes of protection. And within those scopes of protection, some things might be covered and some things might not be covered. This is also very, very relevant in the context of the goods and services. Trademarks are not filed in abstracto, which means that Figma doesn't really own the words dev mode and can't just simply go happy-go-lucky sending cease and desist letters to anybody that ever uses those words. Rather, what they would own in the trademark is the right to use exclusively the words dev mode in the context of a particular set of goods and services. So I did exactly that and I took a look at the trademark application. It was filed to the US Patent and Trademark Office on the 19th of November of 2024. It is in fact a word mark, so we are discussing just the words dev mode, and it is filed for the NIST classification 9 and 42. The NIST classification is essentially a list of different groups of types of goods and services. Particularly 9 and 42 refer to all things computers. And very particularly within those classes is the good and service of computer software. For whatever ungodly reason in the context of intellectual property, computer software is considered anything that it is consumed through a software. So this means that if you file for a trademark because you have a brand that sells online, just because you have a web page and that web page is, well, software, you might be able to register it in the class 9 and 42 because it encompasses everything related to computers. This essentially means, or it boils down, that for the NIST classifications 9 and 42, everything internet related is registered. But I also find something very, very interesting. When you file a trademark, you might do an international application through the Madrid system. The Madrid system is this international filing in which you essentially send your trademark application to the World Intellectual Property Organization and then will in turn send it to all of the offices that you wish to register this trademark, meaning that you can take your US trademark and then register it in a bunch of different countries. Companies usually don't go for a very long list because, well, these filings are expensive and also because these filings are individual, which means that for all of the countries that you wish to register, you'll have your own individual examination process. You'll have to deal with your own, which each individual process opposition, if there are any, and you also have to deal with every single jurisdiction's context, which is very important. Is the context of filing in Japan or China is completely different from that filing on Australia or the European Union. Figma has had a mixed bag of results, as you can see. From 9 jurisdictions that they have applied in addition to the US one, they have been granted protection in 3, 3 are pending decision, and 3 have been denied. It is very interesting to take a look into the ones that those have been denied. So that's exactly what we are going to do. The first one is the Chinese argument. The Chinese office refused on the grounds of similarities because it clashes with previously registered trademarks in China. They refer to 3: DevMore, DevStore, and DevCloud. There are some interesting conclusions that we might take from this, particularly to what it is referred as the inherent strength of a trademark. The inherent strength of a trademark, it is how capable is that trademark of actually identifying your good or service. We will explore this in another office's argument, but the idea here is that you can see that the Chinese are saying, well, the fact that you use the word dev clashes with some other companies that have registered also the word dev or words with dev in the context of computer software. It is also very important to note that the Chinese market does not speak English. So to them, the words dev mode or dev might mean a lot less than to an English speaking audience. The same holds true for Japan or for Brazil, jurisdictions that are not really English based and that the average consumer in this jurisdiction is not expected to know English. Then we have the British argument, which I feel is exemplifies the overall feeling of the internet. They refused the application on the grounds of descriptiveness. Essentially, what they're saying is, well, dev is just an abbreviation of developer, and developer mode, it is not really something that tells me anything about your brand. You're just simply describing your product. The general idea here is that you cannot take something like bicycle and register the word bicycle, because that would entail means that you would be able to exclude anybody else from using the word bicycle, including those people that might be selling, well, bicycles. That seems unfair, and it's outlawed by intellectual property law. So it is said that a trademark needs to be not descriptive. And in the case at hand, what the British office simply concluded is that saying developer mode, it is a assessment about your product rather than the name of your product or something that is able to communicate origin. This idea of communicated origin is also very exemplified by the Singaporean office, which refused on the grounds of distinctiveness. Distinctiveness is the idea that your trademark is able to tell people where the product is coming from, and it's also able to differentiate your goods and services from others people's goods and services. In a very stylish manner, the Singaporean office quite literally, screenshotted themselves, googling what dev mode means, and essentially concluding that dev mode is being used by different people. Particularly, they're saying that it is, again, a short form for developer mode and that this doesn't really communicate origin. Or a fancy way of saying that when people hear the word dev mode, they're not really thinking about Figma. They also brought up the question of acquired distinctiveness. Acquired distinctiveness is the idea that you might use one of these words that are very generic as your trademark insofar as you're able to prove that you've been using it and that people actually um, think about your brand when they use those words. So a very colorful standard for this is the one that the Singaporean office stated in their refusal, meaning that if Figma wanted to register the trademark for Dev Mode, they would need to prove that they have been using it for at least 5 years prior to the application of the mark. And it is not using it anywhere in the world, that they have made use of it in Singapore, that they have in fact pushed for the Singaporean audience to associate the words dev mode to Figma themselves, or the Figma trademark, or I guess more specifically the values associated with Figma and the quality of the products that Figma provides. So what does this tell us? Can Figma sue? Yes, they can. They could sue in the jurisdictions that have already granted them protection, particularly the European Union, Australia, Japan, and the United States. However, it is very, very risky for them to sue for several reasons. One of them is that in order for a trademark infringement to exist, you need to prove the likelihood of confusion. Those are, again, fancy words for saying that it is reasonable to assume that someone would be confused by the usage of the words dev mode in this case. Essentially, um, what Figma would need to prove to a judge is that when somebody else uses the words dev mode, they might confuse the product that they're using with the Figma brand. Another reason why it is incredibly risky to sue is that, in the words of the patent office, the presumptions about your ownership of a trademark may be rebutted in the court, meaning that the fact that it is registered, it is not set in stone. You can, in fact, argue in a proceeding of infringement that such trademark should not be registered. And very conveniently, the British office and the Singaporean office have laid out the blueprint of exactly how you should argue. If Figma were to sue tomorrow Lovable, the Lovable lawyers would simply just have to look at the arguments raised by the British and Singaporean office and adjust them to the context of the claim. But I think a better and more interesting question is, why would Figma do this? Why would Figma send a desist letter to Lovable? What are they doing behind this? Like, surely a multi-million-dollar company is able to understand the basics of trademark law. So they surely have a strategy, right? Well, something to note is that Lovable has somewhat of an aggressive marketing against the Figma brand. You can see from the landing page that they refer to Figma in not the best of ways, saying that Lovable will allow you to bring your design's idea to life without the tedious prototyping work of tools like Figma. Also, Lovable is trying to somewhat draw people from Figma. You can see that they had an extension or a feature in which you are able to import a Figma design into Lovable and have it been turned into code. This is maybe relevant in the context of the likelihood of confusion. You might be able to say that if somebody sees that you're able to bring the design from Figma into the Lovable platform, and that in the Lovable platform you can see that they're using the logo of Figma, that maybe some people would be confused, in fact, as if Lovable is actually associated or not with Figma. But really, this sounds something like it comes out of spite, right? Like, is really Figma doing this because somebody said, oh, Figma is a tedious tool? I really don't think so. I think another very interesting question is, why would Figma file the trademark in the first place? What is the whole idea behind doing it? You might, as long as you're a developer, you might know that this might rub people the wrong way. What are you standing to gain from this, and what are you standing to gain from targeting an EU company that's clearly trying to compete with you? Well, hopefully some of you would have answered my previous question about the likelihood of confusion, stating that probably people won't be confused about Lovable with Figma because Figma does not provide that service. Yet, I think that Figma might be preparing to launch their own AI feature and that they are likely going to call it Dev Mode. I mean, it's notable that they already have a feature called Dev Mode, so they might just be enhancing Dev Mode with an AI chatbot. But in the course of preparing for this new product and this new launch, they have in fact registered the trademark for Dev Mode. And in this context, it directly clashes with Lovable. It's not simply a move out of spite because they said the tool was not their favorite. It's probably more in a strategic engagement, thinking that, well, at some point, and as a matter of fact, people might confuse the fact that Lovable have a dev mode if Figma has a similar feature that is also called dev mode. It's also somewhat interesting to see that the timeline hasn't been fully completed yet. Figma hasn't released it yet, maybe because it hasn't been completely developed, but also, and very likely, because their trademarks application haven't all completed. This leaves us to a very interesting question. Can Figma actually win the case? Well, first of all, the best defense in this case is a good attack. If, in fact, Figma decides to move with an infringement claim, the no-brainer strategy for the Lovable defense is to simply claim the exact arguments that the Singaporean office and the British office have already raised. However, different jurisdictions have different standards, and here it's an interesting standoff. I think that they might genuinely have a case in EU. Why? Well, EU is not a primarily English speaking market, and case law does exist about a similar idea, like the baby dry case, which is almost like a carbon copy of what is happening here. In the baby dry case, Procter and Gamble tried to register the trademark for some diapers. It was in fact refuted that baby dry was a descriptive use of the diapers since, well, that's exactly what diapers are for, but also that even if it was to be considered that it was not descriptive, that they would probably have to show that they have acquired distinctiveness, or meaning that they have had enough of a marketing advertisement and enough of a marketing stunt to have people associate baby dry with them. But what came to be relevant in that case is that, yeah, baby dry, that might be real for an English speaking community, but when you take into account that in the European Union, most of the countries don't have English as a primary language, they might not have such clear-cut connection with the words deaf mode or the words baby dry. It's essentially the same idea as in China or Japan. Because the Chinese market and the Japanese market don't speak English, the words deaf mode don't carry as much of a meaning. And this would probably mean that the defense of copying the argument brought by the British office that deaf mode was in fact descriptive may not hold insofar as deaf mode is only descriptive when you consider it in a context of an English-speaking community. It's also interesting that the Singaporean argument of acquired distinctiveness might hold true by the time Figma is somewhat compelled to sue. If they're releasing the AI feature, they might in fact make huge marketing surrounding their release, insofar as to say that people would associate the words deaf mode with this new Figma release. And if that's the case, by the time they're suing in the European Union, they might have a case. But this also very interesting because I think that this trademark would be really hard to defend than in the United States, in Canada, or even Australia, because they are in fact English-speaking countries. So if Lovable wanted to take the fight to Figma, they could pursue a cancellation of a trademark in these jurisdictions. And this is why the fact that Lovable is EU-based, I think it's very important for the case. Well, because it is an EU-based startup, which their market is primarily targeted towards EU, if Figma wanted to sue Lovable, they can do it in a strategic manner. They can simply sue them only in the European Union, where they know that they, while still risky, they still might have a case. They have supporting case law. They are targeting a market with different languages. So the deaf mode trademark makes a lot of sense there, while withholding to enforce the trademark in the English speaking jurisdictions. This might put Lovable in a bit of a pickle. Why? Because they might end up fighting a fight on two fronts. They might be defending themselves in Europe while also potentially trying to attack them in other jurisdictions, which for a startup might not be the best place to be. Either way, this is extremely speculative, and I might just be completely wrong. Maybe Figma just simply have the trademark for their already existing dev mode, and there is no big AI release inside. Also, by the time that I've recorded, um, Lovable have in fact removed the dev mode um, reference that was in their webpage, and I swear that they have also removed some of the Figma logos that were in the page. I remembered this morning when I logged into Lovable to check out what they're doing that I could import to Figma from an easier way, but now I don't find the button. But that might also be because I just imagined it and it was never there. The truth of the matter is that they just simply removed the dev mode uh, button. So this might imply that Figma has had it their way in having them comply. But I also think it's very interesting to think, why would Figma even file this trademark in the first place? Well, that's pretty much what I just wanted to discuss. So, yeah, I don't know. Read some of the things that I have put in the screen. Try to search it yourself. Reach your own conclusions. Do not take legal advice from a disembodied boys with a cracker cartoon online. And yeah, I don't know. Have a good one.